Andor Season 2 is some of the best Star Wars we have ever gotten, but I nearly gave up after the first 2 episodes. In this video, we're going to be talking about how Andor Season 2 delivers incredible payoff if you have the patience to stick with it. Let's talk about what worked, what dragged, and whether it was all worth it. Andor is truly one of the best pieces of Star Wars media ever released, with so many amazing moments. The highs were really high. Seeing the inner workings of the Empire, specifically the ISB, was incredible. How the ISB uses propaganda to manipulate the media and sway the people into believing what the Empire wants them to believe is something that hits a little too close to home nowadays. It's not just that, it's seeing how the Empire manipulates even some of their most dedicated officers and high-ranking officials, and they don't care who gets hurt along the way. Let's take a look at the chain of command on the Gorman Project. Dedra was in charge of Cyril, using him to spy on the Gorman front from the inside. Once he figured out Dedra was lying to him, he stormed off before getting killed during the Gorman massacre. Dedra was assigned by the ISB and Major Partagez to run the Gorman Project. She is then arrested and thrown in prison for her failure of trying to capture Luthen. Major Partagez then kills himself rather than having to face the wrath of the Emperor for the failure of trying to keep the Death Star a secret from the rebellion. And then finally, Director Krennic, who is the head of the Death Star project, is killed by his very own super laser. Andor really displays how cruel the Empire can be. The Empire will get what they want no matter who is in their way, whether it's a civilian like Cyril or a member of their highest ranks like Krennic. And I've got to say, it's especially heartbreaking in Cyril's case. If you remember back to Season 1, Cyril only got involved in the story because he witnessed Andor murder 2 men in the alleyway. And from that moment on, Cyril basically dedicated his life to bringing Andor to justice. He was fighting for what he believed was right, and I can only imagine how many other civilians got roped into doing the Empire's dirty work because the Empire brainwashed them into believing what they were doing was right. And at the end of it all, Andor didn't even know who Cyril was. And of course, we have got to talk about the rebellion. Andor does such a good job of showing how the Rebel Alliance formed. We got similar scenes in Star Wars Rebels, and overall, it's just cool to see how the full-fledged and organized rebellion that we see in the original trilogy came to be. How many years it took to build everything, all the work that Luthen put into it behind the scenes, and how complicated that process is, all of it is just so compelling. It really makes me want a show focused on the rebellion during the time in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. The process that it took for the rebellion to move from Yavin to Hoth, and explore the 3 years of rebellion activity in between the 2 movies. It's such an untapped time period for Star Wars that I think it would make some really interesting content. But of course, we have to talk about some of the lows of the show as well, and that mainly has to do with pacing. There are some parts of the show that feel so slow. The entire wedding subplot with Mon Mothma during the first 3 episodes feels so drawn out and pointless. I understand we have to keep Mon Mothma involved during these episodes, but I feel like the entire subplot amounts to nothing. We find out that Tay-Kolma's life is falling apart and he wants some compensation from Mon Mothma for all the risks that he's taking, and Mon Mothma is so worried about this. And then it's never expanded upon more, and we never see Tay-Kolma again for the rest of the season. And there are so many scenes like this that just feel kind of slow and pointless. I really like the character development that it brings to some of these characters, but it just makes it really slow and hard to pay attention to during some of these episodes. Another big problem I have is K2SO only being in the last 3 episodes. Cassian and K2's dynamics one of the greatest parts of Rogue One, and I really wish they would have dove more into it. Not having them meet in the first season and then getting them paired together, going on missions for an entire season together, is such a missed opportunity. And then of course there is one last problem that I have, and that's the lack of Princess Leia. Princess Leia was shown to be a high-ranking leader of the rebellion during the OT. Darth Vader even calls her leader of the Rebel Alliance, and she is nowhere to be seen. She just seems like such a key part of the rebellion not to be present. And you could argue that she's still an active member of the Imperial Senate like Mon Mothma and her father Bail Organa, and that's why we never see her on Yavin. But there are plenty of scenes involving the Imperial Senate throughout the show, and to be honest, there's so many that it just feels awkward that she isn't there. I understand why they chose to write around her. The passing of Carrie Fisher in 2016 was a tragedy, rest in peace, but it seems just weird for her to be completely absent from the show. I agree with most people that the weird CGI face swap is just not working with Star Wars, and they should stay away from it if possible. I know recasting legacy characters is controversial, but I do think that would have made a whole lot more sense than just leaving her out of the story completely. They did recast Bail Organa in Andor Season 2 because of scheduling conflicts, And while it was weird to get used to at first, I think it was the right choice. I understand Bail is not an OT legacy character like Leia, but he has had a large role for over 20 years and has really become iconic for the role. And so yeah, I just think that it's weird that such an important and iconic role to the original trilogy is just completely left out here with the building of the rebellion. Andor overall just feels so different than Star Wars content that we normally get. It's deep and complex. Not to say that Star Wars hasn't been this before, but Andor really makes you think about each person involved on a personal level. It explores their motivations and desires, and really makes you feel for characters that you're watching, even the bad guys. I've never felt so bad for a villain than I have for Dedra Meero. She lost the person that she loved, Cyril, because of her own actions and blind allegiance to the Empire, and she paid the price for it. And by the end of the show, she ends up in the same Imperial work camp that Andor was in during season 1. She lost the person she loved, her job, and everything she worked her whole life to accomplish, left in an Imperial work camp to just assemble parts for the Death Star. It's ironic, and it almost makes you feel bad for her. The problem is, the show can take a long time to build these deep connections to these characters. Sometimes it's too long, resulting in the show feeling really slow and drawn out. Overall, the show is a slow burn. Is it worth it? Yes, I think it's worth it, because without it, we wouldn't have such a deep and complex understanding of these characters. But that doesn't change the fact that it is hard to sit through at some points. It's definitely a show that requires patience, and not a show that most kids would be drawn to. But that's okay. I think this is a great example of how versatile Star Wars can be. We can get shows like Star Wars Rebels, which is directly aimed towards kids, and then we can get shows like Andor, and they both can tell us very compelling stories in very different ways. And I really hope that the success of Andor could lead to some more adult-focused Star Wars content in the future. I would want nothing more than an R-rated Darth Vader show or movie that shows how terrifying the most iconic movie villain of all time can be. But yeah, Andor is such a rich and complex version of Star Wars storytelling that requires you to slow down and appreciate the finer details. Is that bad? No. It's not for everybody, but it is a nice change of pace. But I would love to know what you guys have to say about the show, so please leave a comment down below with your thoughts, because I know that there are a ton of mixed feelings about it. If you like this video, hit the like button down below. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. We currently have a full video up on the channel breaking down the Book of Boba Fett, as well as one breaking down Marvel's Thunderbolts and what it means for the future of the MCU. If that interests you, make sure to go check them out, and we'll see y'all in the next one.